What is going on, RotoGrinders? Welcome back to the Best Ball Hot Take Show presented by Underdog Fantasy. I'm your hosting, joined today by the usual suspects. Batting first, leading off, it's ownership projection extraordinaire, the master. If you like anything we do here at RG, Gimino almost definitely has his hands in it behind the scenes, but also a very, very fine fantasy player in his own right. It's Christopher Gimino. What's going on, dude?
About to head off to the great state of New Jersey and register for some fantastic best ball contests in Underdog Fantasy. I can't play here in Pennsylvania, Dean, but they let me register in New Jersey. I'm pulling the siege. I'm gonna go to the Chili's and I'm gonna register for some best ball.
Do you have to go to Chili's? You can go to like a gas station, can't you, or like a rest area or something? You don't have to go to Chili's or get the Wi-Fi, I suppose.
I'm going wherever I can get an Underdog, Dean. Underdog Fantasy is fantastic.
Beer, Chris Prince. You guys know Chris Prince, Beermakersfan, from a lot of things here at the RotoGrinders on our YouTube link. By the way, feel free to like and subscribe. I do appreciate that. Of course, also, Beer is a former FanDuel Live final champion. Beer, how's things for you in your life? How are things in the best ball streets?
Very good. I mean, I'm going to go to my bathroom and do a draft later and maybe sit at some I got softball later. I'm going to do a draft there. So and Gimino, if you're going to do it big. You're going to do the siege. You got to go to Chili's. You got to do the whole shebang. So I'm good, Dino. How are you, my man?
I'm doing well. This is sponsored by Underdog Fantasy, not Chili's, for the record. But what's your favorite Chili's app? You have a favorite a go-to app there, Beer? Is it one kind of pop for you?
I have not been to a Chili's, and I can't tell you the last time. So I don't even know what's on the Chili's menu anymore. So I always was a fan of those. I forget the chicken tender things they had, but yeah, it's been a long time since I've been to Chili's. So maybe I don't want Gimino to sit by himself at a Chili's. Maybe I'll hit a Chili's and we can jump in a draft.
No, I have my first hot take of the show. I will never go to Chili's again, but I will register for Underdog Fantasy again.
Tell us about Underdog Fantasy. By the way, last time I was at Chili's was for the Dundies. It was a long time ago. I try to block it out, but chips and salsa are like $2. That's what I recall. I think that's pretty fair, pretty reasonable. But Underdog Fantasy, best ball, Gimino, people are not aware, and I'm sure a lot of you guys have watched many of our shows. What we do here is we knock out 5 teams. We're going to talk about 5 teams. Did 5 teams last week, 5 teams the week previous. You can go ahead and find all that on the channel, and of course things are fluid and all that. And we kind of meld into other teams as we're talking about the 5 main teams. They're the Chargers, the Jets, Jacksonville, the Raiders, Detroit. It's a hell of a 5 teams. What a great collection we're rolling out for you guys today. Gimino, for the uninitiated, again, most people probably are aware, but what is best ball if they're not, if they don't, I play fantasy. I play DFS season long, but I don't know what best ball is. What is best ball?
Sure. So you're going to draft a set group of players who you're not going to be able to make transactions against. No trades, no waiver wire pickups, no actions to do. Once the draft is done, you're done. So you want to draft a team of guys that are going to be firing at your available roster slots to try to make their way in based on the best possible scores of the week. You don't have to set your lineup. The software will automatically put in the best possible scoring combination of the players that you have. Of course, you've got things to contend with there. Guys getting hurt. You got to contend with guys who don't have necessarily wide ranges of outcomes, don't have quote-unquote spike week potential. So you're ideally trying to make a roster of teams that reaches the top of your division. You're not interested in sort of median type of outcomes. Making the playoffs doesn't matter. You really want to get to the tippy top and try to construct your rosters to win after a 16-week season.
Yeah, Romp Appeal style, set it and forget it. Best ball leagues on Underdog Fantasy, they have them from $3 to $100, including the signature Best Ball Mania tournament. You can turn $25 into $200,000. It's a $1 million prize pool. Now, if $25 is too much for you, no worries. There's a brand new tournament out there right now, $100K as far as total prize pool, $20K to first. You can get that for $5. So you can turn $5 into $20K. Take that down. That's UnderdogFantasy.com. If you're on Team Android, if you're on Team iOS, doesn't matter either way. It works for iOS and for Android. Beer, your thoughts, if you want to kind of add to that, feel free. And we also want to just kind of jump back to the show last week and just kind of clean up what went down with Washington. Geis is no longer on that team. We did not like him last week. Do we like anything else? Okay, now that he's gone, do we care about Washington's backfield, or still it's just sort of a mess?
So real quick on Underdog, the beauty of it's super easy to use. It's from the makers of draft. A lot of people were familiar with the draft apps. Was sad to see it go. There was a lot of speculation on why it went away, why it was never brought back. Well, here we go. We get another shot with Underdog. So you can knock a draft out in a matter of minutes. So Very quick, very easy to use, and great for people that are busy, and they don't have time for waivers and trades and all the other stuff that goes along with a league. So set it, forget it, swing for the fences is my biggest piece of advice I can give you. You play it safe, that's no fun. We're not playing this game to play it safe. Hit some damn home runs and swing big. So speaking of home runs, I think there's a shot here that Antonio Gibson could be that swing for the fences. Now, you may end up strike one, strike two, strike three, you're on the bench, but I think there is some upside here. The issues, the first issue was, a crowded running back room. Well, we've removed Darius Geis from that room. As far as Geis, none of us really liked him, and it kind of sucks. It's just a name that you were hopeful other people would draft, and one of your guys would slide down the list, so we lose that. But as far as Gibson goes, it's really him and Adrian Peterson, I think, really in this backfield. And Adrian Peterson is that safe guy. Like, yeah, he's going to get work. He might score 6 touchdowns, but Gibson's a guy that's electric. You get the ball in his hands, he can make things happen, but very limited sample there as well. So don't really know how this is going to play out. Don't really know if he can be that electric in the league, but we've talked about this team a lot, and Terry McLaurin, really the only name that comes up and we get excited about. So there's room for somebody else to be a playmaker here. Maybe that's Antonio Gibson, maybe it's not, but that's a swing for the fences that I'm willing to make, especially in some of these best ball manias, some of the bigger tournaments where you need those late round home runs. I think he's got to be a guy in that grouping for you.
All right, Beer, open it up for us. First team on the docket here today, the LA Chargers. Our pre-show conversation was Justin Herbert, Justin Hebert, any relation to Bobby? We don't think so. Of course, top draft pick there. But, Tyrod Taylor, he's a DFS darling. He was a few years ago. Ty God, T-Mobile, not really sure which nickname you prefer. They're both pretty fun. Let's start at the quarterback position. What are we doing? Are we assuming it's going to be Taylor's job, and then maybe at some point he kind of hands it over to Herbert? And how do we handle that in best ball?
Yeah, as far as quarterbacks, it feels very much like the Cleveland situation where Tyrod's the guy. He may get 4, 5, 6 weeks, but eventually I think they turn this over to Justin Hebert, Herbert, whatever the hell you want to call him. We know Herbert's the right way to say it, but we're going to go with Hebert just for the hell of it. But I think they spent such a high pick on him that they're going to want to get him involved. This is a team that really worries about the fans and what they're thinking, and it just feels like one of those organizations that's not very well run. So we know the fans are going to be clamoring for this guy. So to me, it's only a matter of time before it's Justin Hebert behind center there for the Chargers. But all in all, a 10,000-foot view, I'm not very high on this team, and maybe that's why we've saved these teams towards the end. This is the outcast of the league offensively. I don't know what makes me more nauseous, this list of teams or thinking about eating anything at Chili's. But back to the Chargers, really Austin Eckler is probably the guy that I'm most interested in. Now, it's going to be interesting to see where he lands. And it depends on, some people love him. Some people say it was a fluke last season. Who is the other running back going to be? Is it Justin Jackson? Is it Joshua Kelly? How many touches is Eckler going to get per game? He's really the only guy that I can see repeating what he did last season or coming close to it, even without Phillip Rivers. Tyrod's not a guy that's going to wing the ball down the field. He's going to have his opportunities, in the short passing game. So I like Eckler. The pass catchers beyond that, I think, are overpriced right now. I think Keenan Allen's one of the most overpriced receivers out there right now, and he's been solid. He's been fantastic, but I just can't see him getting anywhere near the targets that he's been getting over the last few seasons. Hunter Henry, the same thing. We know Phillip Rivers loves to target the tight end. It was a big part of the offense. How much is Tyrod Taylor and Justin Hebert going to use the tight end here? So I think these guys are just overpriced. That's the hot take here is Keenan Allen's being overdrafted. Hunter Henry's being overdrafted. And Eckler, I like him, but he's about right where he should be as far as ADP goes.
If it wasn't clear that this is not sponsored by Chili's, Beer took some shots there.
It's not sponsored by Chili's anymore, baby. Underdog is the clear sponsor here. I just wanted to make that clear.
Just received a call in my ear. Gimino, quarterback situation, do we really care about this as far as the best ball? Do we see any upside or, it's a last pick, I suppose, dart, any interest in these quarterbacks? And then, of course, I want to get to the conversation as far as Allen. Beer is not a fan, and he's always one of those kind of steady eddies. Austin Eckler, if his Twitter game or his Instagram game or his pictures have anything to say about it, he used to be RB1 as far as I'm concerned. But I guess you don't get any fantasy points for that. Beer, You're formerly a part of Bill's Mafia, so I know you got to be a fan at some point, I suppose, of Ty God. But what are we doing here at quarterback, and then spread it out as far as Eckler? Is he kind of where he should be, around 13 when it comes to running backs?
I think Eckler is probably right. He's right at cost right now. I think that if you can draft him in the second round, by all means, go ahead and do so. And it's, again, half-point PPR formats are fine. You'd rather have him in a full PPR format. I think that Austin Eckler is going to have a tough time running the ball behind this offensive line in 2020. But as far as passing work is concerned, I've seen concerns that maybe that could trickle down without Phillip Rivers as the quarterback. But I look at the deep ball rates of Phillip Rivers and Tyrod Taylor from 2016, 2017, back in those years with Buffalo. It's not that far apart. So, I don't know that we're going to be necessarily seeing a ton of difference in the raw volume of passing targets. The Chargers know what they have with Eckler. They're going to deploy him with that in mind. They have a relatively easy schedule, fifth easiest based on Vegas implied totals across the entire league. You look at the schedule, scroll through the first 12 weeks, and you can start to see 4, 5, 6, 7 wins. So I'm not necessarily concerned about them moving the ball, scoring offensively as much as I think some people are. I'm just sort of not taking a hot take approach with the Chargers. Keenan Allen, I'll take him if he falls. I have him probably lower than a lot of people do. I think I have him like wide receiver 24 or something like that. Like I don't have an aggressive stance on Keenan Allen, but I'm not necessarily willing to outright dismiss him. Now, Hunter Henry, I will. I just think that I'm not looking to draft a tight end in the range of where Hunter Henry has been going in a lot of drafts. But, as I go through my most recent best ball drafts, he keeps falling down the list. I think we'll talk about a tight end I want a lot more here later in this show, just at cost. And that's one of the reasons why I'm not really willing to draft a guy like Hunter Henry. I just want to, if I'm not taking one of the top guys, I'm probably just going to wait, into the double-digit rounds, and he doesn't fit that build at all.
Yeah, both of you guys not a big fan of Henry, and I'm seeing he's kind of sort of a no man's land where he's not in the top tiers, obviously. He's not like the late round dart. He's kind of sort of in the middle. If I say a bunch of names, any of these guys that you would take Henry over, they're kind of sort of in the same grouping. Evan Ingram, Higbee, Gronk, Jared Cook, Noah Fant.
That's where you're kind of the Cooks, the Fants of the world. That's where I would think about pulling the trigger. But I'm with Gimino. It's kind of a dead zone here. If I don't go Kittle, Kelsey, maybe even Andrews if he falls far enough, the next group of 5, 6, 7 guys, I'm fine letting them pass. And then getting into those tight ends like Gesicki, Dallas Goedert, I'll take Hayden Hurst over Hunter Henry. I don't know if that's a hot take anymore, but I'll go that far with Hunter Henry. I don't see the upside for him. And this whole group of tight ends is kind of the same. They have different levels of question marks. Ingram, can he stay healthy? Gronk, we don't know what the hell he's going to be. Higbee, is it the guy we saw at the end of the year or the guy that couldn't beat out Gerald Everett? So this whole group has a lot of question marks, and Hunter Henry's included in that.
Beard, where do you have Keenan Allen? Do you have your rankings up in front of you? I know
I do. Wide receiver 26.
And Jimmy, that's kind of sort of where you're at, more or less, like 25, 24?
Yeah, I'm at 24 right now. Due for a rankings update here, but I still don't see him going too much farther down.
I mean, you prefer a McLaurin, right? Last show, I know you're a big fan of his. Yeah, you take McLaurin over him?
Yeah, basically most of the young ascending ex-alpha guys, A.J. Brown, Sutton, Chark, McLaurin, Metcalf, even Calvin Ridley. I mean, I'm ahead of those guys versus a guy like Keenan Allen right now. And I think it's just because I don't know if, while I still think he'll get plenty of targets in this offense, there's really not that many other places to go. I just don't think we're going to see the 10, 11, 12, 13 types of target games we were seeing with Phillip Rivers. I don't think he's going to get force-fed in the same exact way with Tyrod.
Does anybody like anything better than the market on the Chargers? Mike Williams? Or it just seems like you guys are sort of like, nah, this is just this team. If it kind of sort of falls to me and it's slight value and I need and if I need a running back, I guess, in the right spot, I'll take Eckler, but you're not jumping. You're not pouncing for it. This is the message I'm getting, at least, Beer. Mike Williams, worth throwing him out there. Is he, probably around 50 as far as the receivers? Is that good? Is that bad? Is that about right?
I'm probably lower on him as well. It's just a team I'm not overly excited about. So I'm trying to find my Mike Williams rank here. I'm scrolling. I have him wide receiver 55. So
okay.
I'm nowhere near anything. And Keenan Allen, if he falls far enough, and I have him as a early wide receiver 3. I'm not going to get him as my wide receiver 3, but if that were to happen, I'm okay with it. It feels like more of a floor play. Never been a big touchdown maker. You got to think the targets drop in the offense. Hunter Henry's going to get some targets. Eckler's going to get targets. Williams. I mean, it's not like there's nobody else around where he's going to gobble up a million targets. So I would rather shoot for upside with Will Fuller over Keenan Allen. So again, I don't know how hot of a take that is, but that's kind of where I'm at with him right now.
Yeah, I mean, Justin Jackson, in case something happens to Eckler or whatever. I mean, you have anything for me, Gimino? I want to ask, like, the guy you're most likely to draft in this team, the guy you're least likely to draft. I get the least likely, but is there anybody you're most likely to draft here? It's just probably nobody.
Oh, it's Eckler by quite a pretty good sizable margin here. Like I just drafted Eckler. Like I'm definitely willing to take Eckler if he's available as the best available option towards the end of round number 2. But Mike Williams, no thanks. I'm just looking like, when is Mike Williams going to ascend to the number one possible option? I think he's just going to be his role the entire year regardless, as long as he's healthy. So I think that you're looking at better options at his cost. He'd have to fall quite a bit before I'm looking to take him.
Beer, same question. Basically, a player you're most likely to draft, player you're least likely to draft. It sounds like it's Eckler just by default, but he's still perfectly fine. Is that what I'm hearing?
Yeah. Eckler's not a guy I'm gonna reach for and grab in the early second round. If he's there, late second at the 2-3 turn, okay, I'm happy about it. If I miss out on him, oh well. Least likely to draft the rest of this team. I mean, I think you could take a shot. If you have a strong stance on Justin Jackson or Joshua Kelly, what guy it's going to be, I think that could be a valuable role. I think it might be both guys chipping in here. So they're just going to eat away at each other's values. So outside of that, I don't want Allen. I don't want Williams, not high on Henry. Those running backs, super, super late. And even that is a pretty big dart throw.
All right, up next, Jets. Gimino, let's start with Le'Veon Bell, because he seems like a guy that, got paid, wasn't really good. There's supposedly, he's reinvigorated. He's talked about, he knows like people don't like him. It seems in the fantasy industry, he's well aware of this. I saw him talking about it. Is the hate too far around running back 20? Is there actual value in that?
I think I struggle with the coaching staff, with the acquisition of Frank Gore, with the offensive line not being particularly good, with Le'Veon Bell now aging, now getting closer to 30 years old. I mean, all of these different factors sort of converge to say, like, can we really have a reason to be excited about Le'Veon Bell? Are the Jets going to score a lot of points? I don't think anyone is currently on that train. I don't think a lot of people are currently thinking that Adam Gase is trustworthy. We've seen him ruin plenty of players before, including Le'Veon Bell last year in some way, shape, or form. He had to have something to do with the 789 yards, even though Le'Veon Bell appeared in 15 games. I mean, again, you can make excuses all you want for why Le'Veon Bell didn't have a productive season last year, but without the targets, without him playing that sort of combination wide receiver running back role that he had in Pittsburgh, are we, how excited can we get about the Jets starting running back, even if he had all the work again? I don't particularly think Bell is a fantastic pick. I'm sort of lukewarm. I would only take him if he fell really far, and that's usually not going to happen.
Gase also basically implied that, like, he didn't want Le'Veon Bell. Like, that's not my guy. He's here. I guess I'll deal with it. Was not terribly enthused about it. Beer, your thoughts on Bell around running back 20-ish, 19, 20, 21, depending on where you're looking. Is that about right? Do you see an upside where if everything falls his way, he could be a top 8 running back, or maybe go the other way where it can fall off the rails and be like, just 40, 45, 50?
He's being drafted too high, and people are still going off that name brand. They're in the 5th round, and wow, Le'Veon Bell is still available. So when you're playing Underdog Fantasy, you're going to be playing against a lot of people that aren't as experienced as you guys are, that watch these shows and put in the time and do projections and rankings, or even if you're listening to the show, there's just a lot of people that are going to see that name and feel like they're getting good value on that. I go the other way, and there's just too many hurdles, and Gimino nailed it. It starts with Adam Gase, who A, doesn't like this guy, B, doesn't know how to coach a football team. I could see him just giving Le'Veon the big FU, and we're going to give Frank Gore 200 carries here. So you're really counting on receiving volume. And then what's the difference between him and a Tariq Cohen, anything like that? If he's not going to get work as basically a receiver, he's got some more competition here as well. They bring in Perriman, Herndon is back healthy. You got Crowder that gets targets. Mims, we'll see what his role is. So all in all, it's not a good football team. Your running backs need to come from teams that can score some points. This is probably going to be a bottom 10 offense in the league. So just way too many hurdles, question marks, issues to get excited about Le'Veon Bell. Again, if he falls far enough, fine. I have him at RB27. Even at that point, I'm not overly excited about grabbing him there.
Gimino, earlier you said you talked about tight ends, how that wasn't the tight end you're really looking for. Maybe one of these teams that are coming up, there's going to be a tight end you like. Is it quite possibly maybe Chris Herndon?
Well, I definitely do like Chris Herndon. I think he's a good value. At least he was a good value in fantasy drafts. I have been seeing his ADP starting to creep up. I think that there are more people on the idea that he could be a beneficial portion of this offense. And look, like if they're not able to successfully run the ball early downs and they are forced to get out and throw it a little bit here, Herndon's one of the primary weapons that actually has any experience with Sam Darnold here in this passing game. He had a slew of troubles in the last couple of years that have kept him off the field more than he should have been on there. But when you look at the raw talent profile, size, and what we've seen him accomplish when healthy, I think that there's a lot of reasons to start to like the combination of Darnold to Chris Herndon. I don't necessarily like Darnold as much, but I do like the tight end here. I think as long as he continues to get drafted in the deeper rounds, he's definitely one of the guys you should have on your radar amongst that group.
Gimino, Herndon versus Doyle.
I'm taking Herndon.
Beer?
Doyle slightly. Let me go to the rankings. Yeah, I have Doyle ahead of him, but Herndon's a guy I keep moving up, and we forget how good he was in that rookie season. I mean, this is a guy that was pretty explosive. I mean, 7th in explosive plays and eighth in yards per route run that season among tight ends. So, it's, again, a question of the offense. I don't question the talent. It's certainly there, but can he stay healthy, and can this offense be even semi-functional to utilize that talent? So Doyle, I think, will be a safer pick. Herndon is a nice upside, one of those riskier plays, but love the upside there. If he can stay healthy, I think big-time season, even in a bad offense, is certainly possible here.
Beer, can we give Darnold a pass last year for a season basically being derailed the first half more or less with the mono? Is this a bounce back year? He's still plenty young, obviously big pedigree here. And, you can get him really late amongst the quarterbacks. I'm seeing him going around 25 or so. Do you see any potential upside? I know the weapons aren't terribly appealing, but, in a pinch, any interest in Darnold?
I can't give anybody a pass that sees ghosts. So while they're playing quarterback, so
Inky and Blinky are out there.
Right. So I'm a little ahead of ADP. I have him quarterback 23. So, again, it's just too many question marks. We go back to the same questions: the offensive line, the coaching staff. I don't mind the weaponry around him. We've seen some big games out of him. We've also seen him disappear. So, yes, we can give him a pass for last season, but how much can he improve on that is the question mark. So I question the level of upside. I'd rather shoot for a guy like Gardner Minshew, who gives you some upside with his legs, put up better numbers than people realize, than go with a guy like Darnold.
All right, Gimino, your thoughts on Darnold, and bring his receivers into the conversation. Crowder, Perryman, are we seeing value in this, or it's kind of sort of about right? Market price is accurate.
Look, you look at just at anything that you can put your arms around right now with the Jets, and it doesn't seem like it's going to be a good team. And then you factor on the fact that they have like the third toughest schedule based on Vegas implied team wins coming into the season here, and you just look at up and down the division and say, where are the big games going to come in? And it starts to get tough to imagine Sam Darnold being one of the guys that's going to take you to the promised land in a best ball tournament, particularly since there are so many other options being drafted in the game, deep into the draft that can probably give you a better chance at those massive, massive seasons. So I'm not particularly in love with Sam Darnold, and that trickles down to the pass catchers. What does the bell curve look like for Jamison Crowder? He's going to, if you're looking for a player that potentially has some floor in full PPR formats, sure, I think that Jamison Crowder could be steady. I think he could end up in your lineup plenty of times. I think that he'll probably be busy this season, but I don't know that he's going to have like a monster season to the point where he's ever going to completely smash his ADP. You could probably make that case more easily for Brashad Perriman and Denzel Mims. Neither one of these guys has a high ADP right now, which makes them, appealing as late round dart throws in some stretch of the imagination. I would probably lean more towards Mims at this point, because you can probably get him in like the 20th round or like one of the very last rounds, depending on where you're drafting. And Mims is the kind of guy that has like a pedigree, like on paper here, closest comparable Chris Godwin on Player Profiler, massive 96th percentile speed score, massive catch radius, someone who, if the Jets are really bad, like we think they are towards the end of the season, all of a sudden he's a roster differentiator if you actually get to your playoffs. And all of a sudden you've got a guy who's 6'3", 207, flying up and down the field, potentially having a couple of spiked weeks that can really make a difference in what you're trying to do in one of these big tournaments. So Denzel Mims as a very last round type of a guy, I do have some interest in if you can get him there.
Yeah, Crowder's bell curve is more like the equator, more or less. Yeah, and not sexy, but fairly steady, I suppose. Which I don't know if that's exactly what you want. I mean, those steady guys, I guess, are fine in best ball, but you need some guys that have those spike weeks as well. Jump in here, Beer. Your favorite wide receiver by default, if it has to be, when you consider where you have to get him as far as the Jets.
It's definitely by default. Rankings-wise, I have Crowder ahead of the group, but cost-wise, I think Perriman is the guy that can give you those explosive weeks. Yes, it took injuries for him to get on the field and make it happen, but the pedigree is certainly there. First-round pick. Dad played in the league, so I know they signed him to a one-year deal, but I do think there's upside here. I like Mims. I just don't know how quickly he's going to be able to acclimate to the league. Rookie wide receivers, and I hate to use the blanket because I think a few of them are in some pretty good spots. Jalen Reagor, CeeDee Lamb, Jerry Jeudy. So there are guys, not avoiding them all, but again, a bad offense, very limited reps with his quarterback. It's worrisome. And Perriman doesn't have those reps either, and that's why his cost is discounted. So Perriman at cost, Crowder is a guy. It feels more like if you shoot for the moon with a lot of risky receivers, the Will Fullers of the world, and you're loaded up with that. Maybe you balance it out a little bit with a nice floor from Crowder, but cash game play. If we're going to use DFS terminology, and you're rarely playing Jamison Crowder in a tournament. So, maybe in a 12-teamer, a smaller league with your buddies, you need a nice floor play. Okay, you're shooting for the moon, hitting for the fences. Crowder just doesn't fit the build there.
All right, moving on. One of these teams has to be good. Well, not this one. Jacksonville Jaguars. Gimino, who made this list? Who's responsible for this?
We got to talk about all the teams, Dean. They're not all good. So we crammed them all in one episode. How about that?
They're all in the association. Have to acknowledge their existence. Well, there is one player that people like on Jacksonville, Gimino. DJ Chark going around, what I'm saying, around wide receiver 20, give or take, depending on. I got to get a little more update on that. But is that about right? You mentioned the ascending, sexy receivers that are on the way up. DJ Chark, he fits the bill. Your thoughts as far as DJ? Are you going to be more so in depending on what it takes to get him, or is it about right?
I mean, 2 seasons ago, #team preseason, we were looking at DJ Chark and saying, oh, this guy's going to be a stud. He's going to absolutely get it done. Year number 1 wasn't exactly what we had hoped for, but then he comes out last year, goes for 1,000 yards, 73 receptions with Gardner Minshew as the quarterback, with a team that was just pitiful. And look, it's going to be the same thing this season, but there's no reason to expect that DJ Chark is not going to be the number 1 option in this receiving game. When you take a look around, they're certainly not devoid of talent altogether, but this team is definitely going to be really, 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 really bad this season. And he's like the one bright spot that you can look to and say, well, there's going to be the opportunity we want in fantasy football, so we have to look upon that favorably. I'm ranking him below some other guys, so I'm not going to get to a lot of Chark in my drafts, I don't think, because there are just similar types of talents with similar opportunities that are available at the same cost that are probably going to prevent me from having him. But I'm not necessarily opposed to drafting DJ Chark. I think I would just in general prefer to target good NFL teams when I'm drafting my fantasy football teams, and the Jaguars are not that.
Beer, your thoughts on Chark?
I like him, but I kind of echo the sentiments. Is I have him behind, some of the other guys that kind of fall in the same category, the breakout type receivers. So the beauty of this team is they're going to be terrible. They're going to have to be throwing a ton. So that's one card that we can count on here. But I certainly like the talent. And you look around and, they have a cast of names. I'll say it, Westbrook, Conley. We'll see what Chenault's role is right off the bat. He should dominate the targets in this offense. But again, it's kind of like the McLaurin situation is he's also going to see hella coverages because he's the only guy and be the focus of the defense. So it's kind of a two-sided coin, but I do trust the targets. I like Gardner Minshew. I've already said that. So Chark, certainly a guy I think could finish as a solid wide receiver too this season.
Chark versus Keenan Allen.
Chark.
Gimino?
I'm going Chark as well.
Yeah. You mentioned Minshew as one of your dark quarterbacks. What are your thoughts there? Gimino, sure. Give me your thoughts as far as Minshew.
I think the Jaguars defense is going to be so bad. They're not going to be able to cover anyone with one of the worst secondaries that you can find. I just think it's going to be very difficult for, even when they're behind in games, for Minshew to be throwing without duress. Now, he's got legs. He can move. He's got rushing floor. There are reasons to believe that in these best ball structures, for the price point that you're going to pay for Gardner Minshew, that sure, you can try to arrange a little Jaguar stack and try to, sort of outpunch the field with, I can't endorse this, Dean. I'm just not.
You're gonna stop yourself in endorsements.
I want to try to find the bright spot because I think he's fine. This is the hot take show. I'm gonna take a stand. I'm not playing Gardner Minshew as much as everyone else is, even if there is some upside here. I can see the light. That's where I was going, but it's not for me.
Beer, do you see the light, or you're not? You won't stoop. Will you stoop? Will you endorse Minshew?
I absolutely will. I'll take the other side of this. I mean, any guy that can just scare the coronavirus away. He said it took one look at me and ran the other way. I want that guy on my team. So you started to make the case for him, Gimino, and then you bailed. Don't be scared here. This is a guy was a top 10 quarterback through 9 weeks last season. The rushing floor is there. I mean, he was 5th in rushing at the quarterback position last season. Only played 14 games, was pulled out of some games. And when you put his numbers side by side with everybody's darling, Kyler Murray, the numbers are very similar here.
Wow.
I mean, yes, Arizona's going to be a much better offense, but I hate to play the garbage time card here, but you get a defense that's bad, that's going to be throwing a lot, a guy that can run. When you get down to this level of quarterbacks, I'd rather have him than pocket passer Kirk Cousins, some Darnold, some of these other names that are down here. At least he gives you upside. He's already shown he can be a top 10 quarterback in this league. So I think he's one of the best values when you get down to that point at the quarterback position.
Beer, we weren't terribly enthused about the prospects of Le'Veon Bell. Same deal with Leonard Fournette. Most people he seems like 3 years ago, which seems like 10 years ago. But talk to me about Leonard Fournette. Is he somebody that's falling to you? You're interested, or he's just like, nah, not for me. I'll pass because the offense is a mess, and they might be passing the ball the entire second half if they're getting absolutely blown out. What do you think of Fournette? Bust
city. I can't say it enough here. So he really relied on volume last season. A lot of targets in that offense. Chris Thompson's going to be involved. Very familiar with Gruden. I don't think they brought him in for no reason. So you take that volume away. We've already said this is a bad offense. So I know he's due for some positive regression in the touchdown department. And it should have scored more touchdowns with all the touches he had last season. But a bad offense, the touches coming down, the targets and receptions coming down. Another guy, similar to Le'Veon Bell, where you see the name, you get excited about it. I don't want any Leonard Fournette this season. Zero. I'm bust. I'm done with him.
Do you like Thompson more than Armstead?
I want to see how this works out. Neither guy are guys I think you need to draft like in an underdog format, even when you get to the last round. Not overly exciting. If Thompson is that passing downs back, maybe there's some value there just with the garbage time and his team being so bad. But those guys are so far down the list, I'm not even thinking about them right now.
Gimino, Fournette, thoughts?
I don't like running backs who are potentially going to get cut from their team, who play on offenses that don't score touchdowns, who have abnormal levels of targets in a season last year that I don't think will necessarily be at quite the same level this season. I don't want to be associated with him if I have to pay anything at all for him. I think everyone's draftable at the right price, and I can't envision a lot of times where I'm going to be drafting Leonard Fournette in like the 5th, 6th round, which is probably where it's going to take for me to really be excited about. I know there's some people that are on this. They're on the volume. They're on the idea that volume trumps everything else in fantasy football, and I understand that argument. But just for me, I think I can do better, and I'm going to try.
Yeah. By the way, he's only 25. He's another guy that seems like he should be way older, just 25 years old. Like it seems, I don't know. Maybe that's just me.
He looks like he's 60 to begin with, so that's part of the problem.
Yeah, and also, are you buying in on the speculation that the Jaguars are just trying to lose? And how does that matter? How does that factor in? Like they want to tank. Anybody have a thought on that?
Yeah, I think it's certainly got to. Like Gimino said, they're trying to trade this guy. I think they would have took a bag of footballs for him, and nobody wanted him. So. Are we still remembering the guy from LSU or the volume really carried him last season, and maybe it does again this year. And if I miss out on Leonard Fournette, I miss out on Leonard Fournette. But Yeah, I mean, that's got to be in the thinking. You know, they don't make any major moves here. They're going to roll with Gardner Minshew, who I like for fantasy, but he is not a franchise-level quarterback. So, you know, the tank for Lawrence, for Fields, whoever ends up that number one pick, it's got to be in play here. This went from a team that defensively was very good. Now they're one of the worst teams in the league in the span of a few seasons. No quarterback. They don't want their running back. Just this team is just a mess right now.
Eifert, I'm guessing there's not a lot of interest. The wide receiver 2, 3, Conley, Westbrook has darts. Anything for you, Beer?
I think Westbrook has some. I think he's probably the underrated one here. If there is going to be another guy that emerges, I think it's him. I think eventually Laviska Shenault can be a weapon for this team. A guy, basically a running back in a wide receiver body. I mean, with a smart coaching staff, and I don't know that we have that here. Shenault could be a weapon that you use all over the field, but do we get that in year one? He kind of falls in that group of rookie wide receivers I'm nervous about. Conley's just a guy to me, can give you a week or two where in a best ball lineup, sure, you know, you can stack this team pretty easily, grab a Chark in the 4th, 5th round. You get Minshew later on. Maybe you tack on a Conley or a Westbrook to it. So that sense, it's intriguing, but all in all, none of these guys really moved the needle for me.
Gimino, put a bow on the Jags.
If there's any reason the Jaguars surprise us on offense, it will be because all of the guys that you just talked about end up rising above their expectations for the season. You mentioned Laviska Shenault coming in year one and doing damage. He's certainly got a profile of a player who could be productive in the league. I don't know if it's possible that we'll see that in year number 1. But then the 2 tight ends, Tyler Eifert and Josh Oliver, if those guys come in and play really good football at that position, then all of a sudden your passing offense doesn't look as woeful as I think a lot of people are envisioning it to be. It's not just a one-man show with DJ Shark. When you mentioned DJ Westbrook and you mentioned Laviska Shenault, then you've got 2 tight ends who can play, and then suddenly, maybe Uncle Len, isn't the worst player in the league. Maybe he's definitely not the worst running back in the league. So if Minshew can come to play, those guys would be the reason that this team exceeds expectation. I still wouldn't draft any of them in these best ball formats, but I can see, that these are actually really, really respectable players and that this isn't necessarily a lock that they're never going to have any offense this year. I'm just not betting on it.
Beer, you can feel free to give your final thoughts as far as the Jags. We're also going to move on and open up the Raiders, the Las Vegas Raiders. You want to get all specific and technical. And I think a good place to start, I'm seeing these guys kind of next to each other. We talked about Eckler. Jacobs, Eckler, what say you? You one or the other? They're basically the same guy as far as ADP, more or less.
Right now I have Jacobs 14, Eckler 15, looking at my rankings, and I may have to adjust that. I mean, I love Josh Jacobs, the player, and I really wish that they would utilize him more in the passing game. This is the guy that came in the league with that pedigree, shown the ability to do it, but they refuse to not give Jalen Richard targets. They bring in Lynn Bowden from Kentucky, who's kind of a Swiss Army knife receiver out of the backfield. So as much as I want Josh Jacobs to be more involved, I just don't know what his involvement in the passing game is going to be. So he's kind of in that bucket with Nick Chubb, guys like that we just don't know. Are they going to have enough receiving volume to carry a first-round tag? If you get him later in the second, which, again, is not going to happen, I'm okay with it. But I just have too many concerns here with Josh Jacobs. I do think this offense will be better, but and a guy that can do a ton on the ground, but we know that receiving volume so important right now in fantasy, and I just don't see him providing a ton there in this offense.
All right, Gimino, Jacobs versus Eckler. He can catch the football.
Look, with a guy like Austin Eckler, he's pretty much ranked at something close to like the ceiling of what we're seeing. We know what he's capable of. There's not going to be a lot of situations where Eckler all of a sudden is a 10-touchdown rusher, who does all his work on the ground. But I think there is way more of a possibility that a guy like Jacobs, who is ranked with a lot of limitations in mind right now, could explode in the passing game, in some scenarios. I'm not saying that's the most likely scenario. I'm saying that there is upside with Josh Jacobs, whereas I don't think there's more upside with Austin Eckler. He's got one of the very best offensive lines to work with on this team. You've got John Gruden as the head coach here, and I can just envision scenarios where Jacobs is so good. We've seen him bowling over people out there and being one of the best yards created backs out there. All of a sudden Jacobs could just refuse to give the coaches a choice and play so well and keep himself on the field. So that's where I say I like Josh Jacobs a lot more than I like Austin Eckler, just because of the upside. I am concerned about the way this organization sort of is treating the running back position. They're not willing to tell us flat out with their moves and their offseason acquisitions that they are willing to give Jacobs the primary role. But because I think it's in the range of outcomes, I have to like Jacobs better.
All right, let's talk about Darren Waller, Beer. Looks like he's around tight end 5. It seems like he's like the back end of a tier that's basically him and Ertz, or it looks like they're around the same as far as ADP. Do you have a preference as far as Waller versus Ertz?
Right now, Ertz, but this is that same group, and I have Darren Waller tight end 5, so I'm right in line with ADP. But this is that group of guys that if I missed out on those top guys, I'm not overly excited. And I think the hate has gone a little far on Darren Waller. I certainly get the argument. Last year was pretty much the only show in town. Now they bring in all these guys, but are these guys going to dominate targets? Derek Carr has a nice rapport with Darren Waller, and he should have scored more touchdowns than he did with the volume he got. So positive touchdown regression coming. Yeah, maybe the targets dip down a little bit, but I think he can be better, more dynamic as well. I expect this offense to be better. So I don't hate Darren Waller. It's just a spot in the draft where I'm not going out of my way to draft him, if that makes sense. But the hate on him, I think, has gone way too far.
Beer, Derek Carr versus the aforementioned Minshew.
I mean, he's got the upside with his legs, no doubt. I just Derek Carr to me is just a guy. I don't see the upside here. And maybe again, if this offense is that much better, and Ruggs comes in and provides a big playmaker, and Waller does what he did last season, and Jacobs is what he is, maybe there's more upside in Derek Carr. But give me the guy that can run in an offense that's not going to be great, but playing from behind, then a pocket passer in Derek Carr that's never really put outrageous numbers on the board. It's just a guy to me.
Gimino, you almost drew up your mouth when you were kind of sort of somewhat endorsing Minshew, and you stopped yourself. Can you possibly endorse Carr? Now, you don't want Carr because he's not the best quarterback. We live in the world of a draft. You can't just have the best players. You got to goes in order, and you got to draft responsibly. And certain guys are going to be gone by the time Derek Carr comes up. Maybe you don't have a quarterback, you didn't prioritize it. Derek Carr versus Minshew, I presume you prefer Carr. That said, is there any upside there for him?
I don't think so. I'm not interested in investing in the Raiders passing attack per se, which is really what you'd be doing if you were taking Derek Carr. I don't think I have to do it. I think I can do better than both Minshew and Carr. So I'm not really looking to build a lot of teams with either one of these guys. I think the take that I really want to make sure that I crowbar in here is that I would rather lose at Underdog Fantasy in 2020 than draft Darren Waller. I believe very strongly in this. I think that I actually think Darren Waller was fantastic last year. I feel like that if everything mirrored what we saw last year again this year, it would be difficult to make an argument for taking Darren Waller. But just the three factors at play here are, number one, the production that we saw last year. Can it continue? Beer mentioned it, all the different guys that are coming in here. The situation is changing. We've got Henry Ruggs out there. We've got all kinds of other playmakers now in the mix in the receiving game where they were running out Zay Jones last year. This wasn't exactly a world-beating team. Foster Moreau is going to be in year number 2. They brought Jason Witten into the mix. There's a lot of cooks in this kitchen when it comes to distributing the offensive volume here. And I just don't think that you can reasonably give anywhere close to as much to what we saw last year to Waller, even though I think he'll be fine production-wise. But that brings in point number 2, roster construction, where you have to take Darren Waller is not conducive to how I want to build a fantasy best ball roster. I'd rather take one of the bona fide studs like a Travis Kelce and then try to build later in the draft with a second tight end that's really, really cheap, then take a mid-round guy and stack on top of him another riskier tight end. You probably need to take 3 if you take Darren Waller. I don't think that you can consider him so good that you can get away with 2 tight ends. So roster construction-wise, I think it does you a disservice here. And I'm just not convinced that we'll see the exact same efficiency, even though he was one of the most efficient players, forget tight ends, in the league last year.
All right, let's bring in the receivers into the conversation they're kind of mentioned there. I pull up the player profiler.com as far as Henry Ruggs. Marquise Goodwin is his closest comp. 40-yard dash, 100 is his 100th percentile. He's fast. His speed score is 90th percentile, and his burst score is 97th. Oakland likes those fast receivers. They always have. How does that translate for you, Beer, though? You don't get any fantasy points just for being fast, running, what's that? God, I'm so out of football right now. I was just trying to think of the route. What's the name of the route? We just go straight down the field?
Fly route, Dean.
Thank you.
Come on, Dino. We'll get you into football mode.
I have basketball and baseball on my brain and football as well, too. I get sport overload. All right. Talking about the receivers here, Beer. Bring in the Gazelle as well.
I think the days of the Gazelle are done, unfortunately. It was fun for a while there, but this is a pretty crowded room now. Or last year, he was really the only show in town. So really tough to go there. I think the best thing about Henry Ruggs is his basketball highlight videos on YouTube. I mean, that's something to behold. How well does this translate to the NFL? I have my question marks. And, he's being pigeonholed as this guy that can only go deep. And I think there is more to his game. But does he step in right away and become an alpha when he couldn't do that at the University of Alabama? You have to question that. And I know he was a high pick, but I don't know that he's going to be a guy that I want on my teams. The guy I really like here, the other rookie they drafted, is Brian Edwards, who to me is very pro ready. I mean, this is a guy that pretty much was on par or better than Deebo Samuel at their time in South Carolina, and dealt with some injuries and some bad quarterback play there towards the end. But I feel like this is a guy that can come in and provide right away. Now, does he give you a ceiling? No, I don't think anybody in this offense can really give you a ceiling outside of maybe Josh Jacobs. But later on in the draft, down in the 17th, 18th round, I think he will have a role. The question is it from day one or does it take a while? And with COVID, we may not have a while. So those are the issues. But all in all, in longer term down the line, stash that name away. If you start to hear good things about him, I'm a big fan of Brian Edwards.
Jimino, your take as far as the receiving core?
Ruggs is my favorite of these guys. I understand where we're coming on from here with Brian Edwards, but I just feel like because of the draft capital invested, he's going to be on the field day one. They're talking about moving around the formation, getting him actively involved. I think that with the offensive line creating plenty of time for Derek Carr, there will be both opportunities for him to work underneath in the short and intermediate area and get yak. And there'll be also opportunities for him to take some deep shots with Ruggs and his speed. So I do think that if we're talking about which guy do I prefer of this receiving core, I think Ruggs has got the highest floor and the highest ceiling.
Jimino, I know the answer to one of these questions, the player you're most likely to draft here and the player you're least likely to draft in Oakland.
I'm definitely least likely to draft Darren Waller.
Yes.
And I'm most likely to draft Josh Jacobs.
Same question, Beer?
I guess it's Jacobs begrudgingly. Least likely to draft is Derek Carr.
All right, let's move on to the best team amongst, one of the best. Detroit Lions are up next. Stafford is recovering from COVID. You guys have an update on that? I believe he was on the COVID list. We're going to work under the assumption that he's going to be fine, I suppose. Any interest in Stafford as kind of a, what is it, 12, 13, 14? Is that where he's going? Is that about right for you, Beer?
Yeah, I mean, I like him better than ADP. This is a team that I do really like and very, very stackable team here with the Lions. So Stafford's test was a false positive. So we can put that to bed. No worries there. He's fine. But the beauty of this offense is we know where the ball's going. We know it's Kenny Golladay. It's Marvin Jones, who I think is one of the most underrated receivers in this year's fantasy leagues. I mean, there's no reason the gap should be so high between Kenny Golladay and Marvin Jones. When they're on the field together, the numbers are very comparable. And so Marvin Jones, vastly underrated here. But Stafford was he was on pace for 5,000 yards and 38 touchdowns last season. If you run the full season through, and I know it's something some people hate, but the numbers were there, ranked fourth in fantasy points per game in the games that he did play. So it was very good with Darrell Bevell at the controls. And that was a concern going into the season. But this is an offense I think can be much better than people realize. You bring in DeAndre Swift. You got a two-headed monster there with Kerryon Johnson, who I don't think is done either. I like Stafford a ton. I think he's one of the best in that range of quarterbacks. I think he has a lot of upside on that price tag.
All right, Gimino, your thoughts as far as Stafford and bringing the difference between Golladay versus Marvin Jones, and when you consider where you have to take him, who are you more likely to draft? Golladay around 8 or so. Marvin Jones, where's he going? Beer around 30?
That sounds about right. And again, there's tremendous value on that. And again, it's not an exciting name, Marvin Jones, but he might even be later than that. He might be in the 40s of ADP.
All right, your thoughts here, Gimino.
Here's what you do if you find yourself in a relatively late round turn and you've only got one quarterback, or maybe you might not have any quarterbacks yet. You go ahead and if you can find both Marvin Jones and Matthew Stafford available on that turn, take them both. And then if you can get TJ Hawkinson either the round before or the round after those guys, you make that 3-man stack and you make your best ball playoffs. I think that, Beer said it best. The offense is going to be very consolidated. We saw the end of last year, we didn't even have Stafford in play. And that was right up, like Thanksgiving time when I think Hawkinson got hurt. We didn't really get to see the upside that this offense truly has with all three of those, big bodied studs available and really, ramped up. Hawkinson was rookie last year. I think when we come into year 2, we can expect more from him. So that leads me to talking about Stafford. I think he's definitely one of the upside options you should be looking to target. I think there's some other guys that I'm favoring just like ever so slightly more, but it's close. And I think that I want to build plenty of teams with the Lions